Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
This is where we take your sources, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we really dig in to pull out the most important ideas, the key insights.
Yeah, the goal is to give you a shortcut, basically. Help you get informed on something you care about without wading through everything yourself.
Find that signal in the noise, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Get to the core of what the material's really saying and, why it actually matters.
So today we are doing a deep dive into some really interesting perspectives on modern relationships, marriage, and also personal independence.
And this is all coming from excerpts we looked at from the book Don't Look Down on Yourself, Don't Waste Yourself by Van Tien. Specifically, we're focusing on chapters 1, 2, and 3.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive, to really understand the author's key arguments about relationship dynamics, the evolving nature of marriage, and why she thinks self-reliance is so crucial, especially for women.
And we'll do that by pulling out specific examples and insights she offers right there in those chapters.
Okay, let's jump in. Part 1, based on Chapter 1. She starts with a pretty provocative idea.
Yeah, she does.
She argues it's just unreliable, fundamentally unreliable, to hope or expect that your partner's conscience, their guilt, is going to be what drives change in the relationship.
It's a strong opening. And it comes from her own experience, actually. She talks about how she initially wrote, hoping her words might, change men's behavior.
Makes them feel bad, maybe.
Exactly. Make them feel remorse for how they treated their wives. But then she looked at who is actually reading her stuff, over 80% women, and she had this big realization.
Okay, what was that?
Well, she saw that her female readers, yeah, they found comfort, validation, which is good, but the core problems in their relationships, they weren't changing.
Wow.
And she concluded it was partly because the hope for change, the sort of responsibility for it, was being placed entirely on the man.
So the women were just waiting.
Kind of,
Yeah.
waiting for him to read something, feel guilty, and then boom, magically transform. Passively waiting, really.
And she doesn't think that happens often.
Not likely at all. Her conclusion is pretty stark, actually. Hoping a man who mistreats his wife will have some lasting change just because he reads an article or someone tells him off. She says the odds are like winning the lottery.
Wow. That's bleak.
She really emphasizes it. Like, take infidelity, which she uses as an example. It's painful. Men who cheat, she argues, they know. Intellectually, emotionally, they know it causes pain. They know they shouldn't hurt their wives, yet they do it anyway.
Okay, so why?
Mhm.
What's her take on why they continue if they know it's wrong?
Her perspective is that often the satisfaction or benefit they get from that behavior just outweighs the pain their wife feels. Yeah. The wife's tears, her suffering, her patience, none of that is enough to stop him because his own satisfaction is, well, prioritized in his mind.
That's tough to hear, but it definitely shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from hoping for empathy.
Absolutely. And she links this directly to the cost of bad behavior. A man is just way less likely to change if the cost to him is really low, or even zero.
What kind of costs are we talking about?
Like, if his career is totally unaffected, his finances are fine, his wife stays, keeps running the house, maybe still gives him emotional support.
Right. So no real negative consequences for him.
Exactly. So change, if it happens, she suggests it's usually not triggered by the wife's suffering. It's more likely when the behavior starts to seriously threaten something he values.
Like his reputation.
Yeah.
Or money. Or maybe losing the wife's support if she finally hits her limit.
Precisely that. It puts the trigger for change outside of the wife's pain and squarely into the realm of the partner's own self-interest.
So thinking about the listener,
Yeah.
if you're in a tough spot in a relationship and you're kind of waiting for your partner to just get it, feel remorseful, and change, what's the takeaway here? Where should you maybe focus your energy instead?
Well, it strongly suggests that putting all your energy into trying to change someone else's internal feelings, like making them feel guilty, that's probably not the best strategy. It's low probability. The author's own shift in her writing reflects this. She moved towards focusing on personal agency, what you can understand, what you can decide, what you can do, rather than waiting for this internal shift in someone else that might just never happen based on your pain alone.
Which sort of leads us nicely into Chapter 2, where she tackles the changing nature of marriage itself. This whole idea that till death do us part isn't the given it used to be.
Yeah, she really dives into that. She starts with this story about her friend, calls her S, married nearly 20 years, kids. And then her husband suddenly wanted a divorce.
Oh, wow. After that long.
Mm-hmm. And what really struck the author, the surprising part, was that there wasn't some big external thing. No affair, no huge blow-up. He just said he felt suffocated, wanted a different kind of life.
That feels very contemporary, doesn't it? Ending a long marriage not because of a betrayal, but more like personal dissatisfaction, an
Right.
internal feeling.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the author draws a sharp contrast with earlier generations. She uses S's own parents as an example. Apparently, S's mother was notoriously difficult.
How so?
Well, the author mentions her yelling at urban management officials, shouting at home, just generally challenging. And the father, he became quiet, passive.
Sounds like a really tough dynamic.
Oh, definitely. But guess what? They stayed married their whole lives.
Right.
Because, as the author explains, back then, enduring the marriage, happy or not, difficult or not, that was just the norm, the societal default. Divorce had this huge stigma, wasn't as easy or accepted.
Okay, so the big question is, what changed? Why is it now possible, maybe even common, for someone to end a 20-year marriage because they feel suffocated?
She points to a few key things. First, people today generally have much higher expectations for marriage, emotionally, spiritually. It's not just about, having a place to live, raising kids, being financially stable anymore. People want companionship, real emotional support, a mutual growth, fulfillment.
We're looking for a life partner, not just a roommate or a co-parent.
Exactly. Second, societal views on divorce. Totally different. It's way more accepted now, much less stigma attached compared to her parents' time. And third, she points out that external temptations, external options, they've just exploded. More connectivity, more opportunities outside the marriage.
Right. That makes sense. And this leads her to make a really strong statement, doesn't it? About believing your partner will never leave.
Oh, yeah. She calls that belief the idea that your partner is stuck with you no matter how badly you behave. She calls it a malignant tumor for the marriage.
Wow. Malignant tumor. She doesn't pull any punches.
Not at all, because that belief, she says, it just breeds complacency. If you think that marriage certificate is like an ironclad contract they can't break, you stop trying.
You take them for granted.
Completely. You neglect
Yeah.
their feelings, maybe stop working on yourself because you figure, hey, they're not going anywhere.
It kills the motivation that a relationship needs to actually, thrive.
Precisely. So her bottom line for modern marriage is this. Lifelong commitment isn't guaranteed by the paperwork or the years you've already put in. In today's world, it demands continuous mutual effort. Both people have to actively nurture the connection, support each other's growth, consistently make each other feel valued, secure, cared for. It's ongoing work.
An active building process, day in, day out. Thinking about that shift in marriage norms, how does that maybe change how you think about the effort needed in a long-term thing?
It definitely highlights that you can't just rely on old assumptions or societal pressure anymore. It really puts the focus squarely back on the actual dynamic, the connection between the two people involved.
Which brings us neatly to chapter 3, and this is a big one. Dealing with the reality that, well, there's no such thing as a 100% perfect partner.
Right. And this is where the author gets really personal. She uses her own marriage as the main example here. Admits right up front her husband is not 100% perfect and shares some very specific things about him that caused friction for her.
Like what? What kind of things?
Well, first off, his cleanliness, she describes it as excessive, like bathing multiple times a day, constant hand washing, always asking if the food was washed properly.
Okay, that sounds a bit intense.
Yeah, she even jokingly calls him the reincarnation of Tang Sanzang.
Oh, the monk from Journey to the West, known for being a bit fussy.
Exactly. Persistent, maybe a bit naggy about rules. So yeah, it paints a picture.
It does. What else did she find difficult?
His spending habits. Apparently, he tended towards compulsive buying things they didn't need, like exercise machines that became clutter, lots of decor. It bothered her. The wasted money, the clutter.
Okay, I can see that being annoying.
And then there was his work schedule. He traveled a lot, was often absent for long stretches. She mentions needing to make appointments just to spend quality time together.
That sounds like a real disconnect waiting to happen. Work versus relationship time.
For sure. And then the classic clash of interests. He loved loud action movies, booming sound effects and all.
Okay.
And he'd watch them right next to her workspace when she was trying to write and needed quiet.
Oh, no. I can feel the frustration just hearing that. How did she react initially?
Predictably, I guess. She talks about arguments, feeling really annoyed by the clutter, the wasted money. She even admits that sometimes, when she was blocked creatively because of the noise, thoughts of divorce actually crossed her mind.
Over action movies. Wow, it shows how those small things can really build up.
Definitely. How minor irritations can just compound and really affect your well-being. But then something shifted for her. There was a turning point.
Which was,
Advice from her brother.
the brother again. What did he say this time?
It sounds like it was really practical, down-to-earth advice.
Yeah.
He told her to consciously change her focus, start looking at her husband's good points instead.
Okay.
Like he reframed the cleanliness thing. He said, he likes being clean, that's good. Imagine if he was messy, you'd hate that even more. He reminded her of the positives. He provided financially. He gave her a lot of freedom, didn't pressure her about her work or life.
So actively choosing appreciation over irritation.
Kind of, yeah. And his main point was, accept the minor flaws. As long as they aren't the big deal breakers, infidelity, violence, gambling, addiction, learn to live with the small stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He also reframed the work travel. Instead of seeing it as just absence, he pointed out it was tiring work he was doing to provide. He suggested she use that solo time productively for her own things.
Makes sense.
And crucially, he pushed communication and compromise. Figure out ways to manage the conflicts, like her doing less focus-intensive tasks when he watched his loud movies, or maybe him agreeing to go to an actual cinema sometimes when she really needed quiet to write.
So it wasn't about pretending the issues didn't exist, but changing her reaction and finding practical workarounds.
Exactly that. And the author says when she actually started doing this, consciously focusing on the good stuff, like the clean house, his trust in her, how he tolerated her quirks, his basically kind nature, her whole perception started to change.
How so?
The flaws, the things that annoyed her so much, they just seemed less serious, less of a big deal in the grand scheme of things.
Interesting. And did that change in her affect him? Affect the dynamic?
She says it did. She observed that her shift, her increased tolerance, and maybe a different way of communicating, well, her husband felt it. And in response, he became more cooperative, more appreciative, too.
So like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. He started overlooking her flaws more readily and kept seeing her in a positive light. It created this mutual upward spiral in how they interacted.
That's really fascinating. It suggests our own mindset, our perspective, can have a huge impact on the relationship's health, maybe even more than the flaw itself sometimes.
Right. It makes you wonder how much dissatisfaction in relationships comes from hyper-focusing on minor annoyances instead of genuinely appreciating the strengths.
And it raises that tricky question. What's a major deal breaker versus just a minor irritation you could potentially reframe or manage? Where do you draw that line for yourself?
That's the essential question, isn't it? Figuring out what's truly non-negotiable versus what's just part of sharing life with another imperfect person. But the author adds a really important warning here, a caveat.
Oh, what's the catch?
She emphasizes that this tolerance, this understanding, it absolutely has to be mutual, and it cannot be taken for granted.
Right.
Your partner needs to recognize that your understanding, your forgiveness comes from love, from valuing the relationship. It's not because you're stuck or you have no other options or you're just willing to put up with anything.
That's crucial. So if your tolerance is just being exploited or it's totally one-sided.
Then it stops being healthy. It's not part of a good dynamic anymore. It becomes enabling, potentially.
That makes perfect sense. Tolerance isn't about being a doormat. It's a conscious choice you make within a relationship where, ideally, both people are trying to show up with respect and make an effort.
Precisely. It needs that active contribution from both sides to really work.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, we've looked at the author's argument that waiting for a partner's remorse, probably not effective.
Right. Low probability strategy.
We've seen how modern marriage, in her view, demands continuous mutual effort. You can't just coast on old norms.
It's an active process.
And we explore the power of perspective, your own perspective, and finding mutual compromises when dealing with the imperfections that inevitably show up in any long-term partnership, with that important caveat about mutuality.
Yeah, it's really a journey she maps out from maybe hoping someone else will change to recognizing your own agency, understanding the reality of relationships today, and focusing your energy on mutual growth and appreciation instead.
So considering all these points, her emphasis on self-reliance when waiting for change might be futile, the need for ongoing mutual effort in marriage today, and how your perspective shapes how you deal with flaws. Here's a final thought for you, the listener. How do you evaluate that balance in your own life? The balance between your personal independence and the effort needed for a healthy shared partnership.
Definitely something to mull over as you navigate your own path.